Okay, everybody, welcome. Good to see you. New faculty orientation. This is the faith integration section, and we're in session 3. We have some handouts here, and so if you're with us in the room, if you could pass around handouts. If you're not with us in the room, I think you'll get the gist of where we're going with this, and you can follow along with some of what we want to talk about today. All right, so let me tell you the schedule, the hoped-for schedule as we get started today. We're going to start with some conversation. There's some quotes that I've put on the front of the handout, and I'll have you talk a little bit about those. Our big idea today is a part of our faith integration definition, informed reflection. We'll talk about the relationship of faith integration to this idea of informed reflection. We'll have some discussion about that, then talk about faith integration sweet spots and how we identify those and how to find things that can be helpful. And after that, Michelle is here from the theological libraries, and she's going to take us through some tools that we have available to us right here, both from our computers and on campus. And I think you're going to be really encouraged at the resources that are already available for you to get started. We'll do a check-in on how other things are going, and that'll be it. So that's the plan. I hope that works. So you will remember that we're working through 8 competencies related to faith integration. That's those little words on those little round circles. And we are now moving from disciplinary competency to scholarly competency. If you remember when we talked about disciplinary competencies, my point was to say at APU with faith integration, we say God first. I believe that, but it's you're disciplined first when it comes to faith integration. And that doesn't mean God's second in our life. It just means that we get more time for leisure. So God first is important, but in our disciplines we start with the work that's before us and our assignment, and that helps us to get oriented on faith integration. So what's this scholarly competency? It really has 2 parts. Let me introduce you to the 2 parts. Part 1 is the ability to identify and use appropriate academic resources. There are resources available to us that make faith integration work in thoughtful kinds of ways. So that is going to be the emphasis today. I'm not really going to talk about the other part, though I want you to see the other aspect of it, and that is the ability to design meaningful scholarly projects relevant to faith integration in one's disciplines and apply appropriate and legitimate research and representational methodologies. So here we would like to be able to remind you, I'd like to remind you that faith integration scholarship is an exciting kind of endeavor, and there are ways to do it that are probably going to be familiar to you because you're going to be working with your own disciplinary kinds of things. Almost every year I have faculty say, but I'm in this field or that field or the other field, and faith integration doesn't work in scholarship in those ways. And usually after some conversation we figure out how the resources and tools and procedures of your discipline can be very useful in faith integration and supportive of those. And so that is something I want you to see. We're going to focus on that first part, though. And so on your handout, I've got a couple of quotes that I put there. One is from James Turner. James Turner is a professor at Notre Dame, and so he's speaking, even in this quote, from a Catholic perspective. I think that no matter who you are here as a Christian, you're going to find a connection to what he says, and it'll be useful to you as you think about what we're doing here. The other quote comes from David Clarbot in his book Faith and Learning on the Edge. And these are sort of 2 angles on this issue of scholarly resources and their usefulness. And I want you to read those to each other. Talk about those in light of the question that I've given at the bottom of the page. You might have other directions you want to go, and that's fine too. But I'd appreciate if you would read then and chat about those for about 7 or 8 minutes, okay? Okay, let me introduce some further ideas on this to you. I want to talk about this idea of informed reflection, and this comes out of the definition you're becoming familiar with. For APU's idea of faith integration, informed reflection on and discovery of the relationships between Christian faith and the things that we're engaged in studying and teaching. So you've done reflection kinds of exercises for yourself. You've probably asked students to reflect. Left by itself, reflection is an act of teachable self-awareness. It invites us to contemplate and evaluate our beliefs, our practices, and our character, to kind of look inside, to pay attention to what's going there, to try to unsurface the hidden things that might be there. But this gets at it from a little bit further of a perspective in this idea of being informed. And what I'm trying to get at here is that this, in an academic setting, invites credible conversation partners into the learning process. So a person by themselves can reflect, they can learn to do that in better ways. But what we do, and all of us do this, is we bring experts and thought leaders and practitioners into the conversation with us. So here's an analogy for this. Person goes to the mirror, looks in the mirror, and sees that there's something there that they're concerned about. They reflect on that, and they wonder what's going on with that little mark, and I gotta kind of figure that out. Well, they could be left with their own reflection and not get very far. But the smart person is going to go and get a consultation, right? They're going to sit down with a trained expert, dermatologist in this case, and they're going to try to get an answer to what it is that they observe. They're going to try to recognize that they don't know by themselves and someone can help them. And once they know, then they can take the proper course of action. So that's the kind of thing we want to get at with informed reflection. We want to invite people into the conversation. And you do that, again, in your disciplines. But let's tie that to faith integration. Faith integration and informed reflection allows for faith-based assertions to be tied to scholarly evidence. So there are some things that we believe that are simply by faith, and we may never get beyond the mystery of them. But there's a lot of things that we believe in that we're committed to, and practices or ideas in our faith that we can find others who say, yeah, that's right, and they've maybe studied it or thought about it or have ways of expressing it because they can be helpful to us in these ways. Faith-based informed reflection as part of faith integration can illustrate different Christian perspectives. So the way you see it and the way people in your camp see it, that's not the only way to see it. And so inviting other Christian thought leaders into the conversation can give us an opportunity to see things even from different perspectives in the overall faith arena. So informed reflection can expand simple faith-based concepts. So I like to use the example of parenting. The Bible has a little bit to say about parenting, not a whole lot, but some. But what I need is help from people who've taken that kind of thing and gone deeper with it and have written it up and studied it and maybe done research on it and can propose a broader kind of elaboration on things that we have in faith, but we'd be helped by further work. Informed reflection as part of faith integration can ground discipline-related ideals in a Christian understanding. So there are things in our discipline that are important, and we say these are right and these are standards. Inviting others into the conversation helps to make those connections. Faith-informed reflection can link theological insights to the insights of observation. There might be things you see that are common sense, that make sense, that you could just say, I think this is true. But rather than just leaving it that, you invite others in to be a part of that. Let me give you some examples of moving from simple reflection to informed reflection. A professor might say, I recall when I was a practicing professional, I used to pray to start my day. So maybe this is a teacher educator, or a nurse educator, or something like this. The practice frequently gave me strength to face difficult challenges. And that may be true for that person. That's wonderful. But what we want to get to is informed reflection. As a practicing professional, I used to pray to start my day. This practice frequently gave me strength to face difficult challenges. Since then, I found that the literature of our profession suggests that professionals in our field who have developed the habit of spiritual practices are more likely to make wise decisions, experience resilience, and face difficulty with confidence. So now it's more than just a thoughtful testimony, very real and authentic. It becomes something backed by people who've thought it through. How about this one? I believe in the sovereignty of God, and that conviction leads me to believe that historic events are orchestrated by the hand of God. How about that, Evan? Does that one work for you? Informed reflection might say, okay, I believe in the sovereignty of God, but that conviction challenges me when I think about historic events. Theologians such as Brown argue that God's sovereignty means historic events are orchestrated by the hand of God. Other theologians, such as White, suggest the opposite. So here's an interesting issue in the field of history, and people have thought about it, and people can bring insight on that. Jesus modeled the healing power of touch. We too should touch those who are sick and hurting. Jesus modeled the healing power of touch. Is there something about touch that goes beyond this cultural practice and his identity as God the healer? Smith suggests that touch has healing impact in her study of 515 sick men and women. See how that might work? There are many, many Bible verses about the poor, which should remind us that an economy that forgets the poor is unbiblical. Well, that might be your passion and your assertion and what your preacher preaches on Sunday, and it might be absolutely true. But let's do a little more work on that. Let's say there are many, many Bible verses about the poor. So let's study one passage, Isaiah 58, and see if it might have input for our study of the role of free market economies in developing countries. To help us, we'll draw on commentaries written by a number of different people who can help inform our thinking. Music touches the soul, which can be seen by how people in church lift their hearts to God. Observation of people in church suggests that music touches the soul. But observation doesn't tell the whole story. We need to draw on the work of spiritual mothers and fathers of the ancient past and Christian thought leaders from our own day to get insight on the nature of the soul. Only then can we consider if music can touch the soul and in what kinds of ways. Okay? So I've given you some examples here. On the back of that front page, there is a discussion question that I'd like you to chat about for a few minutes. Share an example from your work, either in your classroom or your scholarship, in which you went beyond reflection to informed reflection, and specifically in light of your discipline and Christian faith. Or share an example where you could have been more intentional, or share how you imagine doing this in your work at some future point, either in your teaching or scholarship. And to follow that, what kind of resources do you think may help as you seek to do this informed reflection in your work, okay? So you may have done it. Tell that story. You may have missed it. Tell that story if you're comfortable doing that, or you may have an idea of how you could. Talk about that a little bit. I'll interrupt you in about 6 minutes. Okay, let me interrupt you. Apologize for that. So let me go to a second brief presentation for you related to faith integration sweet spots. And this comes from the part of our definition that suggests that there are relationships between our disciplines and our faith. And I gave you a picture sort of like this last time when we were together talking about these relationships, this idea that they come together. I suppose for God they completely overlap. He knows how to make that work and how to put things together from his perspective. We don't quite have that privilege, and it'll be a while till we get there. But there are things that we do see. And there are things that in our study we can increasingly see. And I say that right in the middle, that's what we call that faith integration sweet spot, when there are things that just seem right on to the kinds of things that bring faith and discipline together. And sometimes when it comes to resources, there are resources that exist that are right on to your interests. So lately I've been working on something related to my interests in agriculture and food. And here's a couple things that I've got that are right on. So here's a book called Scripture, Culture, and Agriculture. Right on, right in the sweet spot in terms of my interest. That's Ellen Davis. Do you know Ellen Davis, Todd? Yeah. Ellen Davis on Scripture, Culture, and Agriculture. Here's Norman Wiersbe from Notre Dame or Duke at Food and Faith, a theology of eating. Did you know there would have been such a thing, right? So here's somebody, Cambridge University Press. This is no slouch. This isn't a basic kind of book. He's thought deeply about the relationship between food and faith. Here's another one. I had to dig a little bit to find something useful for me here. God the Worker by a theologian named Robert Banks. He's got chapters on God as worker, composer and performer, God as metal worker and potter, God as gardener. That's what I'm looking for. God as orchardist, God as farmer, see? So those are things that are in my sweet spot. I did a little hunting, and you find things that can relate. Sometimes you don't find things in the sweet spot, but they're relevant and they get you thinking, and they become opportunities for integration. So here's Vandana Shiva. She's a woman from India, a philosopher from India. Her edited collection, Sustainable Agriculture and Food Security. Here's one on the human cost of food, farm workers, lives, labor, and advocacy. These are not faith-based books, but now I got to do some work. And I got to figure out how to make the kind of integration happen by drawing on sources that have theological connections that can help me make sense of some of the things that I'm working on. Here's some other examples for you when you think about these linkages. And this is another example for me. I did some stuff with my leadership class a few weeks ago on systems thinking. As I thought about systems thinking, I actually thought there's a relationship to shalom, because shalom suggests this idea of parts being at peace with one another in a social system. And so those things came into conversation. And I had this great slide where I was going to show my students all the right answers to the things I'd been asking them to discuss, but they came up with some great stuff. So some good prompting, some good readings that got them started. I talked about systems thinking, introduced shalom, and they just went to town on making some neat connections on that. Social justice is an issue that exists maybe in your discipline. In Christian faith, there's a fellow named Walter Brueggemann. He's an Old Testament scholar. He writes about the prophetic imagination, and there's a wonderful connection that can be made here. If you're interested in literacy, well, maybe you would be interested in the Christian theme of reading for wisdom. Maybe your topic is practicing. We have people who are interested in the practicing of a discipline, the practicing of a career. Well, the Christian faith has a tradition of practices. You can bring those things into connection with each other. Woodworking, that was a random one. We have a guy here on campus who teaches in the theater department, and he is much involved in woodworking because he's a set designer. Well, where's the connection there? In 1 Thessalonians, there's this little phrase where Paul says, work with your hands, and that has birthed a wonderful tradition in Christian faith about people working with material things and appreciating God's creation. Exercise. So some of our physical exercise people are people in applied medicine and sports medicine and science and exercise science. That can be a great way to help people learn how training in exercise relates to spiritual training. That might be a possible link. So those are just some examples. I'd like you to talk for about 5 minutes about some examples in your world. That would be discussion 2. Identify a topic starting from your discipline where there may be a faith integration opportunity. What kind of resources do you need to look for that will help you turn this opportunity into informed reflection from a faith integration perspective? Give you about 6 minutes to talk about this, and then Michelle's going to help us to go further on that from resources from the library, okay? Have a chat. So I want to introduce Michelle. Michelle is one of our theological librarians, and she's been here a long time. And in future APU gatherings, if you have a chance to be in a group with Michelle, she's a kick. Okay, just a lot of fun to have in a group. We've been in a bunch of groups together, and a very fun person. But also has created some resources for us in faith integration that are absolutely lifesavers and helpful and great starting points for a lot of the work that we're going to do. So she's going to do something from the website. So if you want to take any notes where you can kind of find this again after you leave here, I would encourage you to do that. If you're online, I think we have the screen up with what Michelle is going to be talking us through, so you can listen and kind of follow along in that way as well. But I know you'll appreciate what Michelle has to say. When she's finished, there's a further question there for you to talk about, but I've asked her if she can kind of linger while you talk in case you have any clarifying questions for her in light of what she presents to us, okay? Thank you, Michelle, for being here.
All right, good afternoon. Okay, so I gave you guys, not you online, but those in the room, an additional handout. It just summarizes the items that are in this online guide that I created. So this is for you to write on or whatever notes you want to take as I'm going through this. I don't have a lot of time with you today, so what I'm going to do is go through some of the general sections of this guide, and then I'm going to select one discipline and show you what's in each page for each discipline that I have up here. So this guide is to help you find those faith integration resources that are in that sweet spot that Paul was talking about. Now, are you going to find stuff in every single area that hit that sweet spot? Probably not. But most likely you will find something that's at least in the general subject area that may help you. And you guys may be writing some original research, right? When you hit some of those faith integration stuff for FES, or when you're doing scholarship, or you're teaching your classes and coming up with your courses. All right, so I am going to touch on this introduction page. This is where we are right now. And then I'm going to talk about the general resources, search strategies, and then I'm going to select one of these discipline pages to show you. All right, so on the introduction page, there's really only a couple things that I wanted to point out. First, underneath my mug here is my contact information. So if you guys want any more information, I'd be happy to meet with you. This guide is not exhaustive. So if you have questions about any part of it, if you want me to specifically look into a subject area that is not covered in some way in this guide, then I would be happy to meet with you and talk with you about that. The other part of this introduction page, I did, for your courtesy, I believe this is the most current faith integration section in the faculty handbook for FES. So now this guide, I did have faculty in mind, but I don't have any problem with your passing this on to your students at all. So they'll just have to put up with this little FES faith integration section. All right, general resources. I did want to, I'm not going to go down into these 4 sections here. This is actually 5 different pages here. General resources itself is a page, and then each of these is a page as well. These 4 sub-pages, if you want introductions or suggestions for some of these biblical studies and theological resources, want to do a little pre-research or use some of the commentaries as you're studying particular passages, that kind of thing, I have a lot of information and a lot of resources listed in those 4 sections. So I will let you guys look at those on your own. I did want to click on that General Resources tab and show you what's in here. Now, I do have a little index here off to the side where you can, there's a lot of boxes on this page, so you can get quickly to the various boxes on this page. In each page, actually, I have usually a searches to get you started section. What this does, these links here actually perform searches for you in the catalog. This entire page, General Resources, is to give you an introduction to scholarship and faith integration and higher education, some of those broader general overviews of the mixture of those things. So these subject searches also do that. So if you were to click on, well, let's see, how about research moral and ethical aspects, it takes you right into the catalog, takes you into the subject list, so it's as if we've done a subject search. We have 30 things on this subject. How many of you have used Link Plus already since you've been here? Yay, a few, yay, okay. Now Link Plus, I hope you start using it sooner rather than later. Link Plus is another catalog. Instead of being a catalog for just one institution, it's for over 60 other institutions. Most of those, I think, are academic institutions. There's a few others thrown in there, public libraries and a few special libraries. But you will almost always get more stuff out of Link Plus. And so now this is what we call our classic version of the catalog. We actually have 2 versions. I don't know if you've noticed that. If you go to our library website, there's a quick search box. That's one version. If you go above that box to a big link that says catalog, it's this classic version. The reason I like this is because you get this drop-down menu, and you don't get that with quick search. So I've done, as I've said, all these subject searches for you. Now, when you click over here, you probably have noticed this big fat red Link Plus button. The quick search version of the catalog also has Link Plus buttons or links throughout it too. But when you click on this button, it'll go into the Link Plus catalog at the same point you are in our catalog. So it just did a subject search for research, moral, and ethical aspects, actually. So we had 30 things. You can see that Link Plus is going to give you 194. A few of those will be duplicates, but you can see say that Link Plus always gives you more stuff. So I hope you make use of that. Who can tell me how much it costs to use Link Plus? 0. Yeah, it's free. It's a fabulous resource. Well, unless you're late. Now, how would you know that, Paul? Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I don't think we charge fines for our own books, but you will get charged for Link Plus books. So make sure you keep track. You can renew those once, I think, before you have to turn them in. But be sure you keep track of that because you will get charged for those. And also interlibrary loan. Interlibrary loan is free too, by the way. Okay, so make use of those links all the way through. So any questions about what these links are? Some general, these are all perform searches for you in the catalog. All right, I think almost all of the discipline pages have this box too, this Faith Integration Collection at APU. We do have a small print collection in Stamps Library on the second floor that has faith integration resources in it. Covers lots of disciplines as well as having some of the general resources in it too. We continually add to that. We do have faith integration materials that are electronic books as well. That faith integration collection is not all we have. We also have books that are kind of scattered throughout the subject areas in the libraries as well. So it's not the be-all, end-all, but it is a convenient thing to be able to kind of scan through what we have and what we've added recently. So if you click on this link, you'll find we have 273 things so far in that faith integration print collection that we have. I think we used a Lilly grant for that, Liz Leahy and I. So that's for your convenience. And then I've also listed some books that we have at APU that, again, cover some of these general overarching ideas that have to do with faith integration, Christian colleges, higher education, scholarship, those kinds of ideas. So now in this, I think I've done this with all of this. I can't quite tell. Usually I can hover over this, but the link here off to the side, this title link will take you actually into the catalog, and the images take you into Amazon just in case you want to buy any of these. These used to take you into the catalog too, but I figured I'd give you both. So if you want to purchase any of these for your libraries. I also have a section, and I would love to add to any of these boxes and collaborate with you. So this is really kind of a draft, and I would love to add more to this. I can actually add documents too, or PowerPoints, that kind of thing too. So if in any of your areas you want me to add anything, I'd be happy to do that. So I did list some online journal articles that you can take a look at. And then down here, any of you use feed readers? Yeah. So this does, these articles are answers or results of a search I did, and it just continually updates this list. So it's an RSS feed for a search that I did in the ATLA religion database. You can actually go to the ATLA religion database by clicking on that website link, and you can see the search I did, and you can see some of this again is a general list that meets some of those general criteria of this section. So you can comb through that. You could modify my search if you want and do your own thing with that. Internet resources, I got a lot of these from the Faith Integration page, and a few that I've discovered on my own, but these are various resources. A lot of these come from other institutions, as you can see, Baylor, Calvin, George Fox. So these are faith and learning or faith integration resources that you might find at other institutions or organizational websites. So we're in the general resources section. So we're covering introduction, general resources, and search strategies. Yeah, those three. You do need to comb through it, definitely. But yeah, these are the pages these are sub-pages of the general resources section, so I'm not going to cover those. I think I'm almost finished with the general resources page. Let me just comb down if I can. There we go. Oh, and then recently I added this denominational website. So often you can find resolutions or what else do they call them? Initiatives, that kind of thing, on particular, especially social issues or health, bioethical issues, that kind of thing. So if those are of interest. This first link, this Hartford Institute for Religion Research, you can find any denominational website through just that site alone. But if you comb through some of these denominational websites, often you'll find official statements on particular issues. All right, so that's about it there. The search strategies tab has one subpage, and this is actually a guide that helps you with a search technique, finding subjects, finding good subjects. I hope you will take a look at this. The search strategies page itself gives you some strategies for doing catalog searching, internet searching, and journal article database searching, and how to find those sweet spot types of resources in each of those. So please do kind of comb through this. I will point out, again, here's a link to that same subject. When you find those subjects in the catalog, often you can use them in journal article databases. So that means it's a technique where you're going to take a look at those full records all the time and see what subjects are applied to those and use those. But you're actually going to be looking for some subheadings to those subjects. So if you can, see if I can scroll this up a little bit. So for example, this is a screenshot. It's going all over the place. So economics is the main subject, but you get some of these subheadings, and you'll see right away that religious aspects is one. And then you can get some further subheadings. So you can see it's starting with Catholic Church, and then you've even got one further out here. But often after religious aspects, there's also specifically Christianity listed as well. But if you can get in the habit of trying to discover not only the subjects that are related to your topics, but also the subheadings, so you're going to not just be looking for religious aspects. Often you'll see philosophy, moral and ethical aspects shows up a lot, and then professional ethics. Those will all be kind of in this little second column. So discover the subjects that are related to your topics, and then look for those subheadings. So how do you discover those subjects? Take a look at this LibGuide, because I don't have a chance to go through that technique with you today. All right, so, and be sure to use WorldCat too. So after you've exhausted our collection and the Link Plus collection, you still have hundreds of other libraries you can use through WorldCat. And you would use interlibrary loan to request items through that you find in WorldCat, and that's free too. So.
Michelle, I have a question from someone who's remote.
Oh, sure.
He says, I may have missed it, but is there any way to limit the search to scholarly journal articles within the website?
We have not gotten to journal article databases yet. So the answer to that is no, not for catalogs. Library catalogs, you're going to have to determine whether the books are scholarly. There's a variety of ways to do that. But now in this section, journal article databases, I've given you some search strategies. There's essentially 3 different sort of kinds of databases you can use. Subject specific to your area, like for nursing, CINAHL is subject specific. Psychology, PsycInfo is a subject specific database. There are multidisciplinary databases like Academic Search Premier, ProQuest Research Library, and then religious databases such as ATLA Religion and ProQuest Religion. So I've given you strategies for finding faith integration resources in all 3 of those types. And so these databases typically have a little limiter checkbox that says scholarly or peer-reviewed articles. So you need to be looking for that little checkbox when you do database searching. So I hope that answers that one question. I wish I had time to go through all these techniques. And then lastly, I've given you some techniques for searching the internet. So I've got to kind of scramble. So I hope you comb through this. I did lastly want to show you at least one of these pages. How about computer science? How much stuff do you think is out there for computer science? Well, each of these discipline pages has the same sections in it. Again, searches to get you started. You're going to see that these are more subject specific. So we've got computers, religious aspects, for example. And we've also got at least a few books on every page from APU that we have that are related to these discipline areas. There's also some sort of an RSS feed from some type of database. Often I tried to do it from a subject-specific one. Academic Search Premier, that's a multidisciplinary one, didn't have a chance. There's really no subject-specific one that I could find stuff in, so I defaulted to that one. Sometimes I do ATLA religion too. Internet resources, there's only one here. I would love for you guys to help me beef these up. And then this is common to every single page, this more research guides. But, okay, I think I've actually run out of time. So and by the way, just to clarify, each of these discipline pages is going to have the same elements in it, each of these boxes. And again, I would be so happy to add stuff to these pages. So if there's any sort of links or documents or anything you want to give me, I'd be happy to add it. I'd also be happy to teach you more as far as searching goes. I will be doing a session later in November in Darling Library for an hour. So I'm going to send out an announcement for that. So you're going to need to RSVP for that. But all right, I think I'm done.
Good. Isn't this a great gift? Okay, let me talk to you for our last few minutes together. The first thing I wanted to mention is that on the front page, I try to put some resources in the column there. That's a risk because you come from across disciplines and trying to identify things that may be relevant to different ones of you. Let me just tell you about what's there. The first one is where I got one of those quotes that we looked at earlier. And here's a guy who's thinking about faith integration broadly. He has little bits on many of the disciplines, but he's mostly going to give some of his philosophical insights on the enterprise of faith learning integration. And there's some things that will be helpful to you, some things that you'll dispute. That's great. That's not there to say that I or you will agree with all of it. It's there as something to think about. The bottom one is from a couple of guys who've been thinking quite a bit about this whole area. You saw even in Michelle's General Resources, did I get that title? General Resources page. This book was in the column there on the side. It was a red book by Ream and Glanzer, Christian Faith and Scholarship, and they're looking at how that is happening these days. The two that are in the middle are books that have a collection of essays from across the disciplines. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, in a grander way, you could find that fun. But probably on a more practical level, these books have one chapter, maybe, that would be relevant to you. But these are both fairly scholarly in their efforts to work on these things. So, for example, there's a chapter on Christian Faith and the Environment by Celine Dean Drummond. Do either of you in science know Celine Dean Drummond? She's a scientist / theologian from, I think, Notre Dame. And so there's people who are thinking deeply about this, have put some things together. There's some really nice chapters in that first one. The second one is submissions, that is, it's articles from the Christian Scholars Review. The Christian Scholars Review, if you haven't had a chance to look at an issue of that, is people's attempt to do faith integration. I say sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good, so it's not that they're all exemplar in faith integration, but again, crosses the disciplines and gives you samples in many disciplines that'll give you an idea of the kind of scholarship that people are doing. So that's what's going on in those middle two books. I wanted to remind you about this project that I just want to keep it in front of you that we're thinking about as we move through this year. And I hope that you got some ideas today that will be things you can put into your portfolio folder. You'll go to the LibGuide that Michelle pointed out. You'll identify 3 or 4 books that you don't want to forget their titles. You put them in there, and maybe you'll end up writing a short review of some of them that might be helpful in faith integration stuff later or even in your own work. And so I think the practicality of what we've heard today can tie to this as we collect things and eventually make selections on what might go into that. Okay? The next two last things I will say to you are that next time we're going to talk about the competency that we call the intellectual competency. You can see how these first ones fit together in different kinds of ways. We'll talk about intellectual virtues that are helpful to us and to our students. And that I think you will find some value in. Hope you'll be here. And finally, before you go, do make sure you sign in. We appreciate having your autograph on the page in the back of the room. Take some strawberries and some cookies on the way. I'll be here hanging out for a little while. Michelle will hang out for a few minutes if you want to chat. Thank you for participating and being here. We'll see you soon.